Hello. My fiancée mocked me in front of her family, saying, "I'll forget you in a week. I've already found someone better." I simply took the ring back, and she completely lost it. My name is Ben, I am 31, and I work as a project estimator for a construction company in Leeds. My weeks are pretty structured: early starts, site visits, spreadsheets at night, and I am usually the person in my circle who plans first and reacts later. My fiancée is Emma, 29. We had been together a little over 3 years, engaged for 8 months, and we were in that stage where most people assumed the hard part was over because the venue shortlist was done and our parents had already met too many times. I am posting here because what happened last weekend was so abrupt and so bizarre that even now I keep replaying it to check whether I missed something obvious earlier. I do not think I did, but I also know people on here are good at spotting patterns once the shock wears off. From the outside, Emma was the kind of woman everyone described as confident and blunt. That sounds manageable when you first hear it. In practice, it meant she liked having an audience for every opinion she had, especially if she could get a laugh out of it. Early on, I thought it was nerves or just the way her family communicated, because they all interrupted each other, mocked each other, and called it honesty. I am not thin-skinned, and I do not need a partner to be sweet every second, but there is a difference between teasing and trying to establish a pecking order. Over the last 6 months, she got sharper. Not louder, just more deliberate. She started making little comments that only really worked if I stayed still and let them land. She would joke that I was dependable in the way people describe appliances. She once told her cousin that marrying me was the practical choice because at least I would not embarrass her financially. Another time, in front of friends, she said I had the face of a man who asks permission before buying socks. People laughed because she is quick and because I did not react. I told myself I was being mature. The reason I am writing this now is because I finally reacted, and the second I did, everything changed fast. Last Saturday, we drove to her parents' house for her mother's birthday lunch. Nothing unusual on the way there, other than Emma being glued to her phone and smiling at it in a way that felt private. When I asked who she was talking to, she turned the screen away and said work, even though it was a Saturday and she had taken the day off. I noticed it, filed it away, and kept driving. By the time dessert was on the table, I had a bad feeling I could not quite name, and then Emma decided to give it one. Dessert at Emma's parents' house was the usual situation. Too many people around a table that was slightly too small, and everyone speaking half a second louder than necessary. Her family treats conversation like a competitive sport. Whoever gets the biggest laugh wins the round. Her dad was pouring coffee. Her brother was arguing about football with their uncle. Emma was sitting beside me, scrolling on her phone again under the table like she had been doing most of the afternoon. At one point, her aunt asked the standard wedding question. She asked how the planning was going and whether we had finally chosen a venue. That should have been a normal answer. We had actually visited 2 places the previous weekend and narrowed it down. Instead, Emma leaned back in her chair with that expression she uses when she thinks she is about to say something clever. She waved her hand in my direction like she was introducing a product. She said the planning is mostly Ben. He loves spreadsheets. If weddings ran on Excel, he would already have 3 children scheduled. Everyone laughed. That part did not bother me. I am used to being the organized one. Then she kept going. She said, honestly, the only thing I really need to do is show up and make sure he does not panic if the napkin colors are wrong. Another round of laughs. I remember smiling politely because, again, none of that was new. Emma liked playing the role of the carefree one while I was the practical one. But then her cousin asked something small that shifted the whole tone. He asked if Emma was excited about getting married. It was a simple question. One-word answer type of thing. Emma did not answer right away. Instead, she took a sip of wine and looked around the table like she was setting up a punchline. Then she said something that made the entire room go quiet in a way that felt heavier than a joke. She said, honestly, if this does not work out, I will probably forget Ben in a week. A couple people laughed awkwardly, like they were not sure if she was joking yet. Emma looked directly at me then, smiling in that sharp way she sometimes does when she knows she has the room watching. Then she added the line that changed everything. She said, do not worry though. I already found someone better. And the strange thing is she did not say it like a joke. She said it like an announcement. For a few seconds, nobody at the table reacted. You could feel the pause stretch out in that uncomfortable way where people are trying to decide whether they are still inside a joke. Emma's brother looked at her like he expected a punchline to follow. Her dad stopped halfway through pouring coffee. I looked at Emma. She was smiling directly at me, calm and completely unbothered, like she had just made a clever comment about the weather. I asked her one simple question. I asked what she meant by that. Emma shrugged and leaned back in her chair like the attention was exactly what she wanted. She said, "Relax, Ben. Do not look so serious." Then she turned to her mother and said, "See, this is what I mean. He is sweet, but he gets this worried face like I just canceled Christmas." A few people laughed again, but it sounded forced now. I repeated the question. I asked who she meant. Emma rolled her eyes slightly, like I was being slow. She said, "Oh my God, it is not a big mystery. I met someone recently. Someone a little more exciting." The way she said it was not emotional. It was casual, like she was mentioning a new restaurant she liked. Her cousin actually laughed again and said Emma stop messing with him. But Emma did not correct it. Instead, she took another sip of wine and said, "Look, I am just being honest. People settle all the time. At least I admit when I see an upgrade." That word landed hard. Upgrade. I noticed something in that moment that felt important. Emma was not nervous. She was enjoying it. She kept glancing around the table to see who was watching, almost like she expected applause for how bold she was being. Her mother finally spoke up and said, "Emma, that is enough." But Emma waved her off. She looked back at me and said, "Come on, Ben, do not act like you were shocked. You knew I could do better if I really tried." That was the moment the bad feeling I had all afternoon finally settled into something clear. It was not confusion. It was clarity. Emma thought this was entertainment. She thought humiliating me in front of her entire family was some kind of performance. So I stopped trying to argue. Instead, I reached into my pocket. And felt the ring box. I had not planned anything dramatic that day. There was no speech in my head, no confrontation ready to go. But once Emma said the word upgrade, something in my brain just simplified the situation. If someone is openly telling a room full of people they already found someone better, the engagement is already over. The only question left is how quickly you acknowledge it. So I pulled the small box out of my pocket and placed it on the table in front of me. That got everyone's attention immediately. Emma stopped smiling for a second, confused, like the script had suddenly changed. I opened the box and took the ring out. It was quiet enough in that room that I could hear her brother set his glass down. I did not raise my voice. I did not try to argue or lecture her. I just looked at Emma and held my hand out. I told her to give it back. For a moment, she stared at me like she was trying to decide if I was joking. Then she laughed. She said, "Oh my God, Ben, are you being serious right now?" I told her yes. If she had already found someone better, then the ring clearly belonged back with me. That was the exact sentence I used. Her expression changed instantly. The confident smile disappeared, and something much sharper replaced it. She said, "You are really going to be that dramatic over a joke?" I told her it did not sound like a joke. And even if it was, humiliating your fiancé in front of your entire family is not a great foundation for a marriage. Emma crossed her arms and leaned back again. She said, "You are proving my point right now. You cannot even handle a little teasing." I kept my hand out. I told her to give me the ring. The room was completely silent now. No one was laughing anymore. Emma looked around the table, clearly expecting someone to back her up or tell me to relax. Nobody did. So she looked back at me, her face turning red in that slow way people get when embarrassment and anger mix together. Then she said something under her breath about me being pathetic. But she still did not take the ring off. So I repeated it one more time. "Give me the ring back." That was the moment Emma completely lost it. The shift happened faster than anyone expected. The second I asked for the ring back, Emma's smile vanished. She stared at me for a moment like she was trying to figure out whether I was bluffing. Then, without saying anything, she grabbed the ring on her finger and pulled it off. It happened so quickly that a few people at the table actually leaned forward, like they thought they had missed something. Emma held the ring between two fingers and looked at it for a second. Then she tossed it across the table. It hit the edge of my plate, bounced once, and slid to a stop near my hand. The room went completely silent. I picked the ring up and closed the box again. I did not say anything. There was not really anything left to say. That was the moment Emma completely exploded. Her chair pushed back violently as she stood up. She said, "Are you kidding me right now? Not joking. Not teasing." Angry in a way that filled the entire room. She said, "You are seriously going to take the ring back over a joke?" I told her I was taking it back because she had just announced to her entire family that she already had someone better lined up. Emma threw her hands in the air like I was the one behaving irrationally. She said, "Oh my God, you are so dramatic." Her brother tried to step in and said, "Emma, maybe you should calm down." That only made her louder. She snapped at him to stay out of it. Then she pointed directly at me and said, "This is exactly why I get bored with you. Everything is so serious with you. I stayed seated. I put the ring box back into my pocket. I told her that if she wanted someone more exciting, she was now completely free to find him. Emma stared at me like she could not believe what was happening. You could see the moment the situation actually registered in her head. This was not a playful argument. The engagement was over. Her face turned red almost instantly. Then she said something that made the entire table shift uncomfortably in their seats. She said, "You do not get to dump me in front of my own family." And that was when the situation somehow got even more chaotic. The room stayed tense for another minute, but I did not see a reason to keep sitting there. Emma was still standing beside the table, arms crossed, waiting for someone to take her side or pressure me to back down. Nobody did. Her mother looked embarrassed. Her dad avoided eye contact with everyone. At that point, the situation was already clear to me. I stood up, picked up my jacket from the back of the chair, and said I was heading home. Emma immediately snapped back with something sarcastic about me storming off like a child, but I did not respond to it. There was nothing left to debate in that room. On the way out, I told her parents that I was sorry their birthday lunch turned into that situation. Her dad just nodded slowly. He looked tired more than anything. Emma followed me halfway into the hallway, still talking, still trying to reframe everything as if I was overreacting to some harmless joke. I did not stop walking. I left the house, got into my car, and drove back to our place. The drive itself was quiet. No dramatic phone calls. No messages from Emma yet. Just the strange feeling of everything in my life shifting very quickly into a simpler shape. When I got home, the first thing I did was sit down at the kitchen table and open my laptop. There is a practical side to engagements that people forget about until they fall apart. Deposits, reservations, contracts, guest lists. Since I had been the one organizing most of it, I already knew exactly where everything stood. So I started canceling the wedding. The venue was first. We had placed a deposit, but the contract still allowed cancellation within the month with a partial refund. That call took 5 minutes. Then the photographer. Then the catering company. Each call was short and calm. I did not go into personal details. I just said the event was no longer happening. By the time I finished the third cancellation, my phone finally started lighting up. Emma had noticed I was not playing along anymore. My phone kept buzzing on the table. Emma called 3 times in a row before switching to messages. "Answer your phone. You are acting insane right now. Pick up." I did not answer the calls. Instead, I sent one message back. I wrote that the wedding was canceled and the engagement was over. It was one sentence, and it was very clear. Her response came almost immediately. She wrote, "You do not get to decide that by yourself." I did not argue. There was nothing left to debate after what she said at the table. Instead, I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and pulled a suitcase out of the closet. Emma still had a lot of things in the apartment. Clothes in the dresser, shoes by the door, makeup on the bathroom counter. So I started packing her things. Not angrily, just methodically. I folded what was in the dresser first and placed it in the suitcase. Then I moved on to the closet. Dresses, jackets, shoes. Everything went into 2 large suitcases and a gym bag. While I was doing that, my phone kept lighting up. Emma sent another message asking what I thought I was doing. I answered honestly. I told her I was packing her things so she could pick them up. That message triggered a long response from her almost immediately. She said I was being dramatic and childish. She said people joke about their partners all the time and that I was blowing the situation out of proportion just to punish her. Then she called again. This time I answered. Emma did not even say hello. She immediately started talking fast, clearly angry. She said I needed to stop whatever stupid stunt I thought I was pulling and that we were going to talk when she got home. I told her the conversation had already happened. She laughed at that, but it sounded forced. Then she said something that made her position very clear. She said, "You are not ending a 3-year relationship because you got your feelings hurt at lunch." I looked around the bedroom at the half-packed bags. Then I told her calmly that the relationship ended when she announced she had already found someone better. There was a long pause on the phone. Then Emma said she was coming over. And judging by the tone in her voice, she was not planning on arriving calmly. Emma arrived about 20 minutes later. I heard her car pull into the parking lot before she even knocked. The knock itself was loud and impatient, the kind people use when they are already angry before the door opens. By that point, I had already packed everything. 2 suitcases and a gym bag were sitting by the door. When I opened it, Emma walked in immediately. Her face was flushed and tight with irritation. The first thing she said was, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I did not raise my voice. I stepped slightly aside and pointed toward the bags. I told her those were her things. Emma looked down at them and frowned like she could not process what she was seeing. She said, "You actually packed my stuff." I said yes. Then I told her clearly that the wedding was canceled and the relationship was over. I said she needed to take her things and leave. Emma stared at me for a few seconds like she expected me to soften or backtrack. When I did not, her expression shifted from disbelief to anger. She said, "You cannot just throw me out like this." I explained that the apartment lease was in my name and that after what happened earlier there was no reason for her to stay. For a moment, it looked like she wanted to argue again. Her mouth opened slightly, like she was about to start another speech about me overreacting. Then she noticed the ring box sitting on the small table near the door. She looked at it for a second. That seemed to make the situation real for her in a way the packed bags had not. Emma grabbed the handle of one suitcase and pulled it toward the door. The movement was rough and irritated, but she did not say anything else. She dragged the second suitcase behind her, then picked up the gym bag. At the door she paused and looked back at me. Her expression was furious, but she did not start another argument. She just shook her head once like she thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Then she walked out. I closed the door behind her and locked it. And that was the moment the apartment became completely quiet again. After Emma left, the apartment felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful exactly, just empty in a way that made it clear something had ended. I stood there for a few minutes after locking the door, mostly letting my mind settle. The whole day had moved quickly, from that moment at her parents' house to suddenly standing alone in a living room that had been shared until an hour earlier. Then my phone buzzed. Emma. She had already sent 3 messages. The first one said, "You are making a huge mistake." The second one was longer. She said I had embarrassed her, that her family was still asking questions, and that she could not believe I had thrown away our relationship over what she kept calling a harmless joke. The third message was shorter. She wrote that I needed to calm down and apologize so we could fix this before it got worse. I read all 3 messages once. Then I put the phone back on the table. What struck me was that none of the messages included anything close to an apology. There was no acknowledgement of what she said at the table. No recognition that publicly announcing you had already found someone better might actually end an engagement. Instead, the entire tone was built around one idea, that I had overreacted. About 10 minutes later, she tried calling. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then it rang again and again. After the third call, I picked the phone up, opened the message thread, and read through everything one more time just to make sure I was not missing anything important. I was not. Emma was still treating the situation like a temporary argument that I would eventually cool down from. So I made the decision that made the most sense. I blocked her number. Then I blocked her on every other app we used to talk. Messaging, social media, everything. Not out of anger. Just because the relationship was already finished and there was no practical reason to keep the line open for more arguments. Once that was done, I set the phone back on the table. For the first time that entire day, it stopped buzzing. The next morning felt strange, but not chaotic. I woke up earlier than usual out of habit and made coffee. The apartment was quiet in a way it had not been for a long time. Emma was usually up late scrolling through her phone or watching something in the living room. That background noise was gone. My phone stayed silent. Blocking her meant the messages stopped immediately, which honestly made the whole situation easier to think through without constant interruptions. I spent the morning doing a few practical things. First, I emailed the remaining vendor we had for the wedding invitations and canceled that order as well. Then I checked the shared planning document we had been using and archived it. There was no reason to keep revisiting it. Later that afternoon, I got a message from Emma's brother. He wrote that things at their parents' house had been awkward after I left. Apparently, Emma had told everyone I completely overreacted and ruined the lunch over a harmless joke. But according to him, most of the family did not see it that way. He said the moment Emma told everyone she had already found someone better, the room knew the engagement was basically finished whether she meant it seriously or not. He was not trying to defend her. He just said he thought I should know that not everyone there thought I was the villain. I thanked him for telling me and wished him well. That was the entire conversation. Since then, I have not spoken to Emma again. No follow-up arguments. No attempts to meet and talk things through. Nothing. And honestly, that feels like the cleanest outcome possible. The strange part is that the moment everything actually ended was not when she walked out of the apartment. It was earlier. It was that moment at the table when she smiled and told everyone she had already found someone better. Once someone says that out loud in front of an entire room, there is really not much left to salvage. Bye-bye.